forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Guyanese Swag, Trailblazing Voices. My name is Key McKay. I am your host, and we bring you interviews from leaders across the diaspora who are shakers and movers in their field getting things done, y'all. Today we have a multi-talented trailblazer. She's an actor, singer, dancer, and a writer. I'm talking about Melle Phillips. How are you doing today?
I'm so good. How are you doing today?
Same here. I'm excited to be having this conversation with you.
Same here. I'm so excited.
The first question I ask everyone is, where were you born?
I am from Brooklyn, New York. I am born and raised here by way of my two parents who are both from Guyana.
And what part of Guyana are your parents from?
So my mom is from Berbice, and then my dad is from Georgetown.
And for you being first generation American, what was it like growing up with Guyanese parents?
I feel like this is probably going to sound kind of cliche, but I feel like at home it's Guyana, right? And then when I go out, right, it's Brooklyn, it's New York, it's America. Like, you know, you get raised, I think, with all of the cultural upbringing that you would have back home, right? Like the food, the music, the rules, right? The way that they talk to you, the sayings, all of the stories, like, especially I think for me, like the way you regard the family. Mm-hmm. Like I know for both my mom and my dad, right? They both come like from a village of a family. And people, you know, everybody's auntie and uncle. I mean, everybody you have to respect. And they very much raised us with that here. Like I feel lucky because my family really was like not more than 15 minutes away. Like a lot of my extended family where I lived in Brooklyn, we're in Flatbush. Like so many other Guyanese people is like Flatbush or Richmond Hill, right? So a lot of my family was in like a 15 to 20 minute radius. And so that meant, you know, people could watch us. Like actually my next door neighbors were my family, is my grandma's brother. So I grew up with a lot of cousins around me, just like a lot of love, a lot of love. And so I think more than anything, it established like a strong pride in my culture very young. And even when I started school, because most of the people in the neighborhood were Caribbean, like when I went to school, there were other, you know, Guyanese American children, Jamaican children, right? Like Haitian children. So it was almost like we had like a little, well, now they do call it the Little Caribbean, but we had a little Caribbean, right? Like at school, at our church, everything. But it started at home with, I feel like it being a little Guyana.
Oh my God, there's so much to talk about on that note. But for let's dig a little bit deeper into the aspect of the two worlds, because I find that that's the balance that many of us struggle with, even those who are born in Guyana and then move here. It's like that aspect of you're one way at home, and then there's like this other duality of do I be the same person I am at home? What do I say? Like, because growing up in an environment where there's other Caribbean people and they say different things different ways, and then there's the American aspect of it. There's sometimes a struggle of what side do I embrace and when and how do I embrace it? Did you ever experience that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like I think, right, because then on top of it, you're learning to code switch too, from not just culturally, but also, right, like as a Black woman, going out into spaces. Like when I was going to elementary school, I was mostly with other, I would say like students of color, but then I left my neighborhood for middle school because I went to like an arts oriented program. And so then I was coming into contact with like other cultures that were like also not in the Caribbean, right? So like I was having Polish friends and like Chinese friends and all. And so I felt like at a certain point, I honestly felt like I had multiple versions of myself that were like going out into the world, right? Like I had to figure out who to be. And honestly, though, I really think that it helped shape me into an adult that has to be very sure of themselves. Because otherwise, other people will tell you who to be, and other situations will dictate how you show up. So I think even though it was kind of confusing, I think it honestly was a help. And it was an early lesson in like, you have to show up as whoever you are in the moment that you get there, because otherwise people will tell you who you need to be. And I very much experienced that. There was a lot of like trying to fit in, like, oh, this, they don't use this word like here, but then also knowing if I use that word at home, you're gonna have trouble. So just making sure that like I could find a way to become all of those people put in one. And I'm always working on that. Like even now, I would say like, especially in my like early 20s, I was doing like pageants and I was doing all of this stuff and just trying to figure out how to show up. And it's been an ongoing lesson, but I think it started with having like that strong culture at home and learning how to be very proud of it, but also like figuring out what that looked like for me.
What would you say that on all of those experiences that you just talked about and then coming full circle today, what would you say that that has now amounted to be, or how would you define who you are today in retrospect of all of those different aspects of your life?
Are you coming with the questions? Yes. I would say, I think what it has turned me into, or like evolved me into, if I could say that, is somebody who uses that ability as a strength, right? Like now I can relate to people in many walks of life because I know what it's like to almost have to have comported myself into those spaces. So like, you know, you put me in a situation where I've got to talk to a room of middle schoolers. I know how to connect with them because I know what it's like, especially I think like in cities where we typically are, you know, like the New Yorks, the Miamis, the Lauderdales, the Torontos, all of that, like there's usually a lot of immigrant students in general, right? A lot of students who are first gen or they just come to the country. And I think like now I'm able to go into those spaces whenever I have to do like a big talk at a school. I'm able to relate to the students, but also I'm able to go into boardrooms when I need to get funding for a project, right? Like I'm able to say like, oh, I'm a shapeshifter. You can't ever put me into a box, right? Here's how I'm going to show up in this space. Here's how I'm going to make sure that I can secure this message, right? And at the same time, secure the bag. So for me, I think it's really turned me into a multifaceted human being. Like I'm a multi-hyphenate artist, but I think in order to have become that, I've had to really embrace being like a multifaceted human being. And that's what that has turned me into. And I'm walking in it, I'm standing in it, I'm confident in it.
I love that so much. And you actually took us right into my next question. How did that help you evolve? Because now today we see that coming out even in your creativity, where you're not just in one place, you're in several different places and you're doing amazing things in each of those places. Let's go back to the beginning of when did you first realize you were creative and what was the first creative ability that you tapped into?
I knew I was creative, I feel like from birth. I feel like here's the thing, I was a really shy kid. Like when I was in school, my teachers would always put on my report card, like, you know, people would have talks too much. It would be like, we never hear from this child. And like my work would be done, right? But I think that also comes from, I'm the first person born here in my family. And so, you know, there's a lot riding on you when you're the oldest, especially like oldest girl, you know, Guyanese family, like there's just a lot riding on you. And so I think I was very serious as a child and art was like all I had to let everything else out. So there are videos of me on like an old school, like camcorder, like age 5 with like full blown lipstick, eyeshadow. I did my whole face. And then I made like these arm wraps out of like construction paper. My mom has a full video of me like doing choreographed dances. Like 5. So I think from a really young age, art was how I expressed myself, not to be cliche. A lot of artists say that, but I think it's true. And so then as time went on, I started realizing, oh, you want to do this, you have to get some training, you got to learn this. And, you know, Guyanese parents, they really want you to be like a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, engineer, like they have a plan, and I completely understand the plan. They want you to be stable. So from my parents, I think I was always angling. Like I was like, oh, if I can get into this school that's got really good, like a good reputation, and it happens to have a good arts program, can I go? And they were like, yeah, sure. And that was pretty much how I like finagled my way into art school, because the schools always had good academics. And that wasn't necessarily available to me where I lived. So they would be like, okay, let's like, what are the grades at the school look like? Like, what does the city say? And if it looks good, they were like, okay, sure. And then I knew once I got there, oh, they have a dance program, they have a theater program, they have a vocal program. Boom. And so that's how I got into my first program, which was a vocal program when I was in middle school. The school was great. And so they were like, okay, you can go. And from then on, we were on a roll. So that's how it started.
For your parents who you talked about, like many Guyanese parents, there's this, I want you to be stable. I need to know that I didn't come to this country for you to fluff it all away. So I need you to have a serious pathway that you want to go down. Many times they don't see the creative outlet as how are you going to make money as a singer? How are you going to make money as a dancer? If it's not these occupations that has a long-standing history of providing an income, we're not interested. Yeah. What was that conversation like, saying, hey, I like the good grades thing, but it's not for me? What was that conversation to say, I'm going down the creative pathway and that's what it is?
You know what? I think it got to a place where it was like inevitable. Like they kept seeing me, like, they're like, okay, this girl keeps telling us she got another show. She keeps, and I would just, every time I would come home with like flyers for shows that we were doing, because I'm also fortunate that like the schools that I went to happened to have a lot of space for us to innovate as creators. And there was a lot of like pride in our identities, lots of stuff. And so they encouraged us to make work, to like participate in things that were reflective of us. So I was always coming home with like a this, a that, whatever. I think by the time I was like, this is what I'm deciding to do. They were like, okay, girl, go ahead. But that said, it was kind of hard fought because for a while, so like when I initially went to school, I was planning on being a reporter. I started with communications, but the whole entire time I was performing. Like I was always in a dance company or something. And then when I got out of school, we were in a recession and I decided that I was going to do AmeriCorps. So I did Teach for America, which is what led me to Miami. That was a phenomenal experience. And I think that's how I discovered that I really liked, part of what was going to be my life story was making things for children. And I don't think I'll ever stop doing that. And so in starting to do that, I was like, oh, all of my entertainment stuff is coming back, right? I have a creative writing degree. I was writing stuff and I was like, okay. I found a program at NYU that allowed me to pursue both my master's in education and theater. And so I was still like straddling the line because I was like, okay, look, right? But also those were two things that I was actually really, really passionate about. So I was like, okay, great. Like I can continue working on this stuff for kids. But in addition to that, I can get the training that I'm needing. So my parents were still good with it. And I went on and I taught for 4 years. The entire time I was teaching full time, I was so exhausted because I was also in a dance company and I was taking gigs the entire time. So there just came a point where I think they saw on me that it had worn on me, like I was tired, like I'm going to work, I'm giving it my all. And then I'm going to performances, I'm giving it my all and I'm tired. So there came a point where I was like, I think I have to find a different way to contribute to children's lives. And I have to put me first in this regard. So I feel like those two things, like, them sort of always knowing. And my mom said it. She was like, in the back of my mind, I always knew we were going to get here. So by the time I sat them down and did sit down, I was like, okay, I got some pine tarts. I had some tea. I sat them down and it was like, what is this? He knew. But we had a really good talk. And I'm grateful that my parents, they're kind of flexible, I think, especially thinking about like, the school of thought they come from, they're actually kind of open to those conversations. So it was like my mid-20s. And by that point, they were like, okay, listen, go with God. And my dad's main thing was like, you have to be able to sustain yourself. If I ever see that you don't seem well, like you're not doing well, I'm going to call you up and we're going to have a conversation. And I'm grateful that hasn't happened.
Wow. It sounds like your parents were very supportive, even if their vision for you wasn't necessarily your vision for yourself. They were nonetheless very supportive and they sent you out to be yourself with love. And it wasn't a thing of, well, my way or the highway.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. And I'm grateful for that. It took us a while to come around to them seeing this as like a career path, but I think will always remain. I never doubted like that they would love me through it. And I'm grateful for that.
That is pretty amazing.
Mhm.
For the person who's looking at this video or listening to the audio, and they're like, I want to get into the world of creativity, whether it's singing or dancing or acting or writing or any form of creativity, even videography or whatever. What are some steps or some things that they should be doing now that can help prepare them better for that world?
I say make the things you want to make right now. Like I was having a conversation with a friend and telling her about a script that I was working on. And I was like, yeah, but I just need this and I need that. And she was like, just write it. And I think now looking back, that was the best advice she could have given me because that script turned into my podcast. And that podcast has led to a world of opportunity for me, for my business partner. But I think wherever you are, if you have an idea, the best thing you can do is get the idea out of your head and onto whatever medium it is. I think also be protective of your idea, right? Like be careful who you tell it to. And I'm not saying that to be paranoid because some people will be like, you can't tell anybody. And like, we all need help, right? Like none of us is an island, but be protective of your idea, right? If you know that you've got people in your life who they may not be living in their dream, right? And so it's hard for them to support you living in theirs. It's not an excuse to throw shade. And it's not like I'm literally not trying to shade them at all, but sometimes it's difficult for people to see your vision. So you really got to protect your vision, your baby. And as you're birthing it, then you can share it with people as necessary, right? And when you've got that final product, even if it's not perfection, right? Your idea of it, somebody needs it because otherwise you wouldn't be called forth to make it. And that's honestly what I've realized when we started Goodnight Black Child, which is my podcast. My co-producer Brittany and I, we had like, she's a super talented musician. I'm like, right? And I'm a storyteller. We had a mic, we had her cello, and we had some software. What that podcast has opened up for us now is so much, right? And over the course of that, I've been on like streaming platforms on other shows that I'm working on as an actor. She's done SNL, like Lincoln Center, right? Opportunities have opened up for us separately, but I honestly don't know that any of them would have. Maybe this is just like my spiritual take on it if we hadn't allowed that thing to come out first. So I think start where you are. Don't let anybody tell you that what you're creating isn't important. So protect it and share with people who will support. And also when you can get training. Like I do think it's always good to be in community with people who are doing the thing that you want to do and can help you. Sometimes that's class, sometimes that's a cohort of people like a writing group or an acting group. If you're a dancer, like sometimes that's finding a local place to take classes. But you have to train also. It doesn't have to be in like a specific way. You got to train, you have to work on your craft. And I think as you do those you will grow and you will start being able to expand your art because you'll see things that you couldn't see before. So
you touched on two really important things that I want to dig a little bit deeper into. The first one being collaboration, and how you talked about collaborating with your partner, Brittany, in bringing forward your vision. How has that helped you, not just in this one area with the podcast, but in other areas of your life, being able to collaborate with other creatives and even people who aren't creative?
It is so freeing. It is so freeing because I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to project this out onto anybody out there, but for me, I can really get into my head about the things that I am making to the point where sometimes if I don't let go, I won't create them. And having somebody else to just bounce an idea off of, or maybe you weren't supposed to create that whole thing. Maybe their vision is the thing that makes it complete. So it's like having somebody come in and say like, oh, actually, I was thinking we should do this here. It's like, oh, great. So the thing that I was worrying about, it doesn't even have to exist in this project. Maybe it came to me for something different. So when you have the right people around you and they want to succeed, they want this thing to succeed because they believe in it with you, you can do things that you've never believed, right, in your wildest dreams that you would be capable of, but also like things that you didn't know existed because you were meant to bring them forth. And then speaking, I want to touch on, you asked like such a good question about the non-creative part. You need those people. You need the people who, and you know what? I guess to some degree, we're all creators, right? Because even the accountants or whoever, they're creating stuff. They're creating spreadsheets. And so, right? And so like, you need the people who have like, who can reel you in a little bit and say like, oh, here's where we said we were going. This is how much it's going to cost. Are we still going here? So like, you need everybody, but I think the key is like, and you know in your spirit when somebody comes to you and they're pure of heart and they want to collaborate for the right reasons, because you also need somebody who's going to weather it with you, right? Like sometimes you put an episode out. Well, for me, I'll speak for myself. Like sometimes I put an episode out and the episode is like, okay, it got streams, but not as many. Like, all right, on to the next. Now we refine the strategy. So I think it just is about knowing who those people are based on how they come to you and what their energy is giving, but also like embrace it. Nobody's an island. We can't do a thing by ourselves. Truly.
I love it. I love it. The second part of that question is you talked about being in community. And I want to dig deeper into that because I find that not just creatives, but people as a whole, sometimes it's like, well, I have this thing and I want, whether it's fear or insecurity, it's like you don't want to put it out to other people because you're telling yourself a story about what they're going to think or what they're going to say. And then the other side of it is not knowing how to articulate yourself in a community. So you just keep it to yourself. And sometimes most of the times not being in community can be very costly because you end up not creating at all because you're just in your head. So how do you choose the right communities to articulate any vision into or to even birth yourself or grow yourself into?
Mm-hmm. Mm. You know what? I think that's a really good question. I think I look at what they're doing on their own, right? Because like, if you're coming to me we're building something together, I need to know like what you're making, what you're working on, because that'll help me, I think 99% of the time, that'll help me figure out where you're coming from. Like if I see that the work, for instance, what you're doing, right? Like I see what you're doing, right? Nobody is going to go hard at something like building a community if the community doesn't mean anything to them. So if I'm seeing that the work that you're doing is about building community, adding in some way to the world, adding to legacy, adding to a sense of peace, adding to a sense of unity, automatically I'm going to start feeling your vibe. Like, I'm like, okay, we could work together a little bit. I like what you got going on. Then it's like, how could we work together? And if you have an idea about that, cool, bring it to me and we can see if that works with what I have going on right now. But if you don't, one of my mentors, Maxine, she always tells me like, she doesn't invest in products, she invests in relationships, right? So she's like, I don't invest in like people who can do something for me right now and it leads to a product. I invest in people who are doing cool stuff that I believe in. And eventually, if we're supposed to work together, we will. And that's how I feel. So it's like, sometimes I meet somebody and we may not be working together right away now, but I know that there's something about that person that I admire. And I think that eventually there may be something that we could do together when I feel called to it. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of that for me is spiritually just trusting that God is going to bring me to the next project that I'm supposed to be on, but also that the people that are coming into my sphere, we're all interacting with each other for a reason. So I would say like, if you are, for anybody out there who's thinking about collaborating, look at what the person is doing on their own. They're just coming to you and they're like, oh, like I want to work on this. And they've got nothing going on. It's like, well, so do you want me to do the work or But if they have things going on that are dope and you're like, oh, wow, we could work together. Sure, either now or eventually.
How do you, because in community and collaboration in all these places and spaces, and you talked on this a little bit earlier, how do you protect what you're bringing to the table, but then at the same time share it freely?
Oof. That is a great question. That is a great question. I think, well, okay, one part is I have to trust the person I'm working with too. I should have said that in the last question. If I don't trust your integrity as a person, that's a big old red flag to me. Like, and sometimes it's honestly inexplicable. Something in my gut where I'm just like, no. Sometimes it's documentation, right? Like people will show up and want you to sign things and you got to have your things ready for them to sign too. And like there are like great practical resources like LegalZoom or other things that I use to help me in those kinds of collaborative relationships. But my very first stop is my gut feeling. If it feels like this person is not, someone who's good of heart, then I already know that as we move forward, I'm not going to be able to share freely. I'm going to want to keep things tight to my chest. So I think it starts with the person. Then once we have the person, because, people do change, I make sure that I have the documents in place where my ideas are protected, their ideas are protected. And something else I've learned, because I do oftentimes, people say you can't work with friends. I don't necessarily think that's true. I just think you have to establish the rules of the relationship from the beginning, because if those rules are not established, things do get murky. And I've learned that the hard way. But I will say, since I've started making those rules and establishing them at the beginning, it's been a lot easier. So have your paperwork ready and have the hard discussions early, right? How are we going to be sharing our ideas? When those ideas are shared, who else can we share them with? What documentation do we need to make sure that your intellectual property is protected and mine is? How do profits happen if like one part of the business takes off more than the other does, right? So for me, it's like, I try to be proactive. That way, when it comes time to have those conversations, I can speak freely. I've even gone so far as to, with one friend who I'm working on something with now, we signed an NDA with each other. Which like, it seemed kind of dramatic at the beginning, but now things are kind of taking off and we're like, dang, glad we did that. So for me, it's helpful to do that at the beginning because I love my people a lot and I don't want to lose a good friendship over business, but I also don't want to lose like a sense of self over wanting to people please, if that makes sense.
Oh my God, that was such a perfect question to end on. People pleasing. You're like literally making my brain roll with these questions. As people, as human beings, it's easy to people please, but even more so as creatives, because there's this element of you where you're putting out publicly and you want people to like what you're doing publicly because honestly, that's how the profits happen. But then at the same time, it's having a strong sense of character and dignity to say, you know what, even if this will please everyone else, but it's not in line with my morals or my values, I will not do it. How do you make those decisions?
You know what? You said this is the last question?
No, I said this is a really good question, but
okay, got it. Because I was gonna say, no, it doesn't have to be the last question, but I was just thinking that's such like a full circle thing to the beginning. Because remember how I was talking about how I started like compartmentalizing myself, and then I had to just like, well, I think that's how I get at it. I wouldn't say that I have it all the way on lock yet, but I think that's how I have over the years, and like getting older also helps too. You become more like solidified in your stuff. But I think a huge part of it is that when you're sitting in who you are, it's just like, okay, well, does this serve my vision? And it's a hard thing to do, especially when it's people you love. I think that's when it's hardest. It's not hard for me to worry about that when it comes to like, random person that I'm talking to at the McDonald's drive-thru, right? Or like, or whatever. But when it comes to people that I love, I think that's where I really have to negotiate it. And then thinking about an audience, right? what's unique, I feel like with a lot of artists is that we are the product. Like, I guess I'm thinking about like actors, dancers, singers, anyone where like the vessel is the work, then we are to some degree the product, but I don't want to think about myself as a product. Like, I'm a human being. And so for me, it has been really negotiating, not seeing myself as like a brand solely that needs to exist in the world, but also trying to be realistic about the fact that like people who don't know me, who will find me via the things that I've acted on or the shows that I'm in or whatever, for them that, you know, they don't know me like the person, they know me as whatever thing they encounter me as. So I think I just try to keep a healthy balance by number one, like keeping my own spiritual practice, you know, frankly, like in check, like making sure that I'm meditating, that I'm worshiping in ways that feel good for me, that I am right. And this is not like a religious rant either, because I feel like this goes for literally anybody, any religion or not religion, right? Like just things that sustain me as a person, because then I don't feel desperate. Like if I'm able to check in with myself, check in with people who I know, you know, going back to my parents or like my husband or whoever, people who I know want absolutely nothing from me, right? They just want to see me thrive. They know I want to see them thrive. Checking in with those people because they're also a good tell. Like your people know when you're off. So for me, it's always about, because I think I start wanting to people please when I start feeling like I have to control things. I got to get a handle on whatever the narrative. Oh, I didn't get this grant, or oh, I didn't book this job. Well, now I've got to, you know, try to control it so that I can affirm to myself that like, oh, I'm still doing something. And it's like, no, like you were worthy from the beginning. And if you've forgotten that, which sometimes I do, got to do some things to get back in check. So I think it all comes back to the place of like me being, making sure that I'm staying in relationship with myself, who I am as a person, and then saying to myself, all right, cool. So you don't need to do all this hustling and bustling. You have to just show up as you are, going back to that first question, be who you are, and it'll be enough. And if it's not enough for this thing, that thing wasn't for you. So that is how I do my best to keep it in check, but it still gets me sometimes. I'm not like a guru. It gets me.
Oh my God, I am so enjoying this conversation. On that note, we're going to take a quick break for a message from today's sponsor, and we'll be right back.
Meet Kim. She recently moved to a new neighborhood and has a craving for pine tart and cheese rolls. She Googled Guyanese restaurants in her neighborhood and received recommendations for Ghanaian restaurants instead. While she was at the park walking, her dog Kim ran into Susan, a fellow Guyanese, who introduced her to the Guyanese Swag Business Directory, a comprehensive listing of reputable Guyanese-owned businesses across the diaspora. Kim now regularly visits the GuyaneseSwag.net, where she can easily find trusted and reliable Guyanese-owned businesses and stay updated on upcoming events throughout the diaspora. Since the directory offers detailed business profiles, including pictures, videos, specials, contact information, and even reviews from neighbors, Kim is able to stay connected to her roots in her new home away from home. Register your business for free by visiting GuyaneseSwag.net.
Hello and welcome back. We're really having a really great conversation with Mel, and I'm so excited. If you guys haven't caught the first part of this, I highly recommend you go back and watch it, listen to it, because this has been a really amazing conversation. Mel, my next question for you is, you talked briefly about spirituality. We live in a country where spirituality means different things, really in a world where spirituality means different things for different people. What does spirituality mean to you, and what does it look like?
For me, I think it really means like having a practice that you could rely on to bring you closer to whoever you worship. For me, that's God, right? But like, I know that that's different for everyone. The name, right? And also just like, if they decide to worship at all, I think no matter what, there has to be something that like holds you up underneath, right? Like that makes you feel like there's a reason beyond your work that you exist. For me, that's what it is. So having and I guess I use the word spirituality to get away from the word religion. And it's not because I think there's anything wrong with religion, but I think once you say religion, people just automatically have an idea of like whatever they consider it to be. So for me, I have like a lot of respect, especially, you know, being Guyanese, there's like a lot of religions within our culture. And so growing up in a family that's like, you know, my family is multi-religious, multi-ethnic. I just grew up always having like a strong respect for everybody has their thing and they should be free to practice it. So for me, spirituality is literally having a practice that brings you closer to who or what you believe in. And I'm grateful to have that practice in my adult life because I think for a little while, I didn't necessarily see the importance of it, but I see it. I have seen it now, I think for going on 10 years, really the importance of having that like established and knowing what is going to bring me back to me.
How does that contribute to your work? But then also, how does it keep you? You talked about this again a little bit earlier. How does it keep you grounded in everything that you're doing?
It helps me so that I don't ever have to forget like what I'm doing things for. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Like for me, right, if I'm ever like, oh, this doesn't sit well in my gut, there can be a pressure, especially in like, you know, media, in like work that we do to be like, oh, that's fine. Like, I'm going to do it anyway to get my name out there for exposure. And all of that is important. I'm not saying that you can do anything without exposure, but sometimes I really have to sit in a choice that I've made, right? That could bring me really good exposure, but it doesn't really align with what I'm trying to do. I have to really sit in that and be like, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make the decision that works for me. And that has been like a huge beacon. But sometimes you really got to like, for me, I really have to be like, do you believe what you say you believe? Because sometimes, you know, like things will come by and you're like, oh, that would be great. That would be a great paycheck, or that would be a great opportunity. But then you're just like, but then like 10 years down the line, am I cool with having chosen to do that? So for me, I think that's like a lot of like how it grounds me and keeps me in check is like, I always have to remember that God got me. And so if I'm going to do it, it's going to get done. Like if I'm meant to do it, it's going to get done.
I really love that so much. Let's talk about the money aspect of it, because there's one thing to be creative. There's another thing to be creative and be profitable. And then there's another thing to be creative and in desperation. And as an artist, as a creator, I find that whether it's business or acting or singing or dancing, or even like any person that's doing anything, you have to go through that phase of, I have this idea. Now I have to grind to make this idea a reality. Then I have to prove to everyone that this idea is worth supporting. And then I got to figure out how to make it profitable. It's a cycle that all of us go through. What was that cycle like for you?
For me, I think, well, initially when I left my full-time job teaching, I was like, okay, I'm going to make this work, because I also had decided then to go back to school, and I went to conservatory. So at the time I was like, okay, I'm in school. I just need something to like pay my bills. Like this is going to be, you know, this is not going to be the year where I'm trying to travel and right. I'm focused. And once I get out of this program, which ended up being some programs, then I can refocus. But also like something that I think added to it was like in the process, I then fell in love. So now I'm in a situation where, right, like I have my bills to pay, but also I'm a part of a partnership. And I think that's something too that like, as creatives sometimes can feel a little bit lopsided, right? Like if you have a partner, that's my partner, he's a phenomenal visual artist, but he's not a creative for a living. And so wanting to make sure that I was holding up my end of like what I have going on, taking care of things that I had going on. Honestly, at the beginning, it was stressful. Like I was stressed out. But I think also there was this, and I'm glad it's changing. It's changing because there's a bunch of amazing artists who are like, no, I can do this and that. I started realizing like, okay, I just need to find a job that can accommodate this until this is lucrative enough for it to be my full-time thing. And I did, right? Like I found a job that was okay with me taking time, like doing shows that was very flexible. And it was amazing. And I think like it was mentally, I had to get over the idea that I wasn't an artist if I had a job, if I had a day job. Which is something so common, especially in like the acting profession. Like most of us have day jobs that sustain us between like, even some of my friends who are like, you know, regulars on television shows consistently, they've got other jobs, right? That sustains them in between. And so I had to really get over the mental hump of like, you're not an actor. You're not a performer. If you have a 9-to-5 paycheck, it's like, no, actually, if you can take care of yourself, if you like have money to get food, if you are able to take classes, like, you know, continue to keep your toolkit fresh, that makes you a better artist because you're healthy. So I spent probably a year just like doing that tug of like the struggle. And then I was just like, I don't think this is sustainable. And then truly a blessing came through, which was during the pandemic of all times, right? When my day job, I was like furloughed from my day job. And then I have a wonderful teaching artist job that I maintain with a theater. Those things had slowed down, right? I got a call, like my manager called me and she was like, oh, there's this kids show that I had auditioned for, I would say like 3 months prior. I just thought they didn't, you know, go with me. You know, you win some, you lose some. That's the business. And she was like, yeah, they wanted you to come in for like a test, which I was like, I didn't even know, as I said, I didn't even know that I was in the running anymore. So to have a test was like, and that opportunity like led to me working for ABC Mouse, which was phenomenal. And that lasted for nearly all of the time we were in lockdown.
Wow.
They gave me the option of like going into a studio and shooting remotely because they shot from LA, and they shot me here. So we had the choice of doing that either from my home or from a studio. We ended up setting it up in my apartment, and we remote shot that show. And there are so many aspects of how that gig came to me and how wonderful I mean, truly some of the best people I've ever worked with. But also how accommodating they were of me, of my home, of like making sure that I felt safe during the pandemic. I really couldn't have dreamt that up, right? And so, and also pay-wise, that sustained me at a time where the day job that I had wouldn't. And so I think that all comes back to like me just trusting that what is for me is for me. I always go back to that when I'm in a dark moment because the gift that everything about that situation was, it really doesn't make sense any other way than it was just supposed to come to me that way. And I'm so grateful, you know, to God for that opportunity, but just like in general, it's a reinforcement to me about like that. So the money comes, right? And then like after that gig was over, I went back to having a day job, right? And I still maintain that. And I make sure that I do what I do for that. But again, like just been lucky. I've been very, very lucky. I think blessed, honored, humbled, privileged to have situations where people accommodate me. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just very grateful for that. They accommodate my lifestyle.
Oh my God, I really don't want this conversation to end, but I definitely want to be respectful of your time. This has really been amazing. For the people who are listening, they're watching, and they're like, I love everything this woman is saying, and I want to support what she's doing. First of all, tell them a little bit more, because we didn't even get into that. Get a little bit deeper about what it is that you're working on. And secondly, how can they support it?
Yeah, so as you said at the beginning, I'm a multi-hyphenate. So I have a couple of things that I'm working on right now. I am working on putting together a show. It is actually going to be, the premise of it is around how Carnival unites all of us throughout the diaspora. And so that is a show that is in the planning phases. And so if you go to my website, which is mellephillips.com, MELLEPHILLIPS.com, you can follow my work on that. I will have some exciting news that I can't talk about yet, but I should be able to talk about it in a week. So please keep an eye on my social media because I'm going to have a very big announcement. You can still catch some of the episodes of ABC Mouse that I'm on. I'm told they like air sporadically all the time. I saw myself on an airplane like 2 weeks ago, so that was cool. And then I also I'm a member of Kanu Dance Theater. So we just had a show at the Queen's Theater, but we'll have shows coming forth in the fall, some pieces that I'll be choreographing for that. And yeah, my podcast, Goodnight Black Child, is also a huge part of the work that I do. The stories are written completely originally by me. And then we also bring in folk tales from the diaspora. So each episode features one original story, one story from the diaspora, and original music written by my partner, Brittany, who is phenomenal. Yeah, and so you can just keep up with me on all my socials. It's Melle Phillips on Facebook, on Instagram. And I'm just looking forward to creating more things, being a part of more things, because this really is my passion. And I love, love, love supporting the community, bolstering the community through my work, and also getting to explore new things through my work. So yeah, that's me.
Oh my God. Listen, I highly encourage you guys, please go follow, connect, visit the website. She's really doing amazing things. Her work is amazing. Go and watch the reruns of the show because it's and she's really an amazing actor, and everything that she's doing is amazing. I thank you guys for hanging out with us today. Thank you for tuning in, whether you're listening to the podcast or watching this video. We appreciate you guys being a part of the Guyanese Swag community. Go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, drop us a comment, and while you're down there, click the links and connect with Mill. Support what she's doing. We thank you guys. Go out and have yourself a phenomenal day.
Share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell.